Welcome to Senior Living Investment with Emily Bow. Today, I'm thrilled to introduce our guest, Michael Wilson, a 20-plus year veteran of the mobile home park industry and a licensed Colorado manufactured home dealer with over 50 million worth of parks acquired, operated, and brokered. Michael has a wealth of experience as a principal and founding partner at CL3 Capital LLC, he focuses on acquiring and operating manufactured home communities across the country, providing safe, affordable, and family-friendly living environments. Michael's dedication extends to his mobile home brokerage in Denver, where he and his wife, Traci, specialize in serving seniors, assisting them through the housing transition process. Together with their team, they've facilitated over 4 million in manufactured home sales. Welcome to the show, Michael.
Emily, thank you so much for the invitation. It's an honor to be here.
Thank you. You tell us a little bit more about your business and your role and your profession background.
Sure. Many years ago, I was in the Air Force, got out of the Air Force, and then I'd always had a heart for business, and so began a path of more entrepreneurial, events, and then what eventually happened over a few businesses, which some did better than others, ultimately ended up in investing into manufactured housing. And so met a mentor many years ago, and we decided to put a business plan together where we were acquiring manufactured homes in the Denver market, and we would buy, he'd provide capital, and I would go out and do the frontline work, find the opportunities, negotiate pricing. We would buy, but then we had a unique, what I would call secret sauce, where we would sell the homes and then we would finance them to the buyers, which in our particular market and demographic, we have more buyers than lenders and buyer qualifying for lenders to acquire the homes. So we started slowly building and doing that. And I would say my first memory of this was I had purchased a home, a little 3-bedroom, 2-bath home, and marketed, where we did some financing with little or no credit, or bad credit was okay. I ended up did an open house, and I think we had 38 to 40 people in that little mobile home. So I think that was evidence of proof of concept for us that we were onto something. And so over the period of years, we've done that. And then, of course, transition within that particular space in the mobile home park industry is you want to own the dirt underneath the homes and then move to a land lease business model. So really over the last 15 years, still doing home investment, obviously with my brokerage as well, but really primarily focused now on acquiring mobile home communities throughout the United States, as you had mentioned.
Wow.
So
Okay.
ultimately today, that's what we do, and we specialize. And I have a brokerage here where, and we'll talk a little bit more about that, how we service seniors within our market, within that particular housing industry. But that's how I ended up, so to speak, where I am today.
Okay. It's more like because you met the right person who was your mentor, then got you into mobile home parks.
It's a good question, and I remember that period of time in my life where I was drifting. I had a business where we owned some, back in those days, we had owned, myself and some other partners owned some health clubs actually in the Denver market, and they had failed as a business. We ended up shuttering those, and I was really at a point of I maybe perhaps some despair, but not knowing next step. I do remember many days and nights of praying to God, not so much to give me the way out, but to bring an individual in my life that perhaps could speak into my life, or where they've been or where they are, is to help me to get to a path of going that direction as well. And I wasn't looking for a friend, because mentors aren't designed to be your friend. They're designed to be a teacher, first and foremost. And it's to draw out of you what you didn't realize that was within you. And in my particular case, at that time, losing a business, which was, it's a death. And so you go through a mourning process, and of course you lose, at least in my particular case, lost confidence in just what I believe God had called me to do. And then this individual showed up and said, let's go run with this. I see something in you that you don't see in yourself right now, but let's go make this happen.
I love it. So what kind of value did you bring to the table to your mentor on the first project together?
If you were to ask him, what I had done was I took a step, and in this process, kind of in the middle of the ocean, I heard on the radio at that time there was a real estate investment seminar that was coming to the Denver market. I'll never forget. I was actually listening to a Christian radio show, and they had marketed, because this group they were out of Florida, which is kind of I think by and large the birthplace of many real estate investment gurus, if you will. The amazing thing is I heard it and I said, I gotta be here. I've got to be in the room. It's something I'm interested in. And to be quite honest, I didn't have anything else really working. But so I got in this room, and they began to, teach and present how to buy and invest in real estate, and of course, create long-term income and blah, blah, blah. We've all kind of heard that. And I was sitting in the room of about 600 people. And the individual that was leading it began to lay out a plan of where using wealth as a tool for the kingdom of God to facilitate providing provision, and how to build wealth, but use it with intentional purposes and a plan behind that to use it almost as a weapon against the other forces that want to stop the kingdom from growing. Your question is, it's touching a piece of me that I actually go back to that moment. I started crying. I actually started crying in the middle of this room, and it was God and the Holy Spirit moving on me to break off, I believe, my preconceived notions. And I think you and I had talked about how trapped inside many of us are what I would say legalistic, or maybe even the wrong thinking about being prosperous or prosperity. Not from a message standpoint, but if you to enter in and to go into the marketplace, to start, launch, grow a business or multiple businesses, it's really truly with the intention to become successful with those businesses, as highly and as capable as you can be, with, again, that profit is provision for somebody else's vision, I guess is probably a way to say it. And anyway, so out of that meeting, I was referred to this particular gentleman who was very successful in the Denver market, and he had an idea about way to finance real estate owner care concept. And he said, I could apply this to manufactured homes. And I said, okay, I surrender. Sometimes you have to get to the point of just saying, I quit, right? You say, I quit. And if you're my mentor, I'm truly going to submit, if you will, to the authority or the place, the reason that God brought you into my life. And we began to work together. He had some capital that he needed to put to work. We created the vehicle with the manufactured homes by which to do that. He did phenomenally well, and I was able to recover and heal financially. And then from that point, again, just it launched going forward where I am today.
It's amazing how God works. Yeah. Can you share your journey to Christ? How you integrate your faith with your professional life?
Sure. Many of us that may come through hardship or challenges, or I need a lifesaver. Mine was really came to fruition through failures here in business and at that particular point. And I had value wise, my pyramid was upside down. I was 31 when I came to Christ. So had some perspective on life, and had some people that at that particular point that were witnessing to me. Actually, the staff at at one of my businesses, they somehow God had placed Christians in my midst, and I wasn't. I was more of a tester, probably, to their testimony. I think I mentioned this to you, that I see God's currency on earth as his people, his creation. And so, you can pray for tangible things, But I've found for me either to be promoted, to be witnessed to hear God many times. It's through conversations or people or a meeting like an Emily Bow. He's moving his creation around to align to ultimately accomplish, in my opinion, his purpose. And so that's how I came to Christ. And then how does that play into what we do today? I'm a huge proponent of marketplace ministry, and I'm a huge proponent of business and businessmen and businesswomen that are actively in the marketplace, growing their businesses, developing their businesses, but with the opportunity to touch public, a lost public that many times in other forms of evangelism, we don't have or aren't going to get that connection, especially when your business grows and you have a larger platform, you're
Mm-hmm.
either customer base or you're opening multiple locations, or you're expanding even to other states. Really, I really, from the bottom of my heart, believe that the call on Christian businessmen and women is to really reach and touch a lost world that may perhaps never set foot in a church, but we get to be that face to face, either individually or our services or the way that our business, the way that we operate our businesses, but many opportunities to do that. And we do that internally with what we always examine to make sure that's an impact that we're having in what we do.
Amen. Amen. But being Christian, the mission we have from God is to share the gospel, and how we can use that opportunity to touch the life is really something I think every single of us should reflect upon.
I often wonder, well, who's going to take your place, right? Within the marketplace, or who does that strategic move? And again, could be a calling, may not, maybe just I feel led that I want to be inside the church, or I want to be inside ministry. There's no doubt that there's a greater challenge with being in the marketplace and amongst people. I've seen that happen a lot and as I said, it's more of a question I ask myself, is that what you were growing your business, you had relevance in the marketplace, you were expanding, you were touching, you were God's hands and feet. If you take that away, somehow we lose that opportunity that you were provided with. And not to say that somebody wouldn't fill that gap, pray. Make sure before you unplug out of the marketplace that truly, because most very successful business people that I've found, and you could probably speak to this, they can pivot very easily, right? What their to some degree, what their talents or what their gifts are to grow their business is easily translatable back into the ministry, or even vice versa, right? Anyway, all that to say is that I'm a huge, like I said, a huge proponent of marketplace.
Why do you think mobile home park is a good asset class for investments?
Oh, well, yeah, I think that's a great question. And I, of course, have very strong opinions about that in comparison to at least my asset class that I've chosen to be in within real estate has come through a development of comparison and other opportunities within the marketplace, and you tend to start to do an inventory or kind of a comparable to different asset classes or even different business models. You've got to walk away with what is it that the objective for you, or the intention for you and your family, what it is that as a tool would provide the highest and best opportunity, not a guarantee, the highest and best opportunity to achieve that. As I mentioned, I began as an investor financing homes to those people that could not qualify to own homes. So that was a way I could serve. The fruit of that is it was a very profitable way to create yield on our investments and to finance individuals. So I took a look at that business and said, okay, of course, it's working well. And we had to address first what happens when it fails, right? We took a stance when I was evaluating this as a business, is there will be times when people won't pay, first and foremost. So whether you're renting or you're doing some financing, but if there's a payment obligation back to you, and it isn't a one-time transaction, right? Somebody's buying something in your store and they're walking out, but you you have to address the, kind of the gorilla in the room that it will fail. So we looked long and hard of how we treat, how do we, even as a ministry mindset, how do we treat that situation?
Mm-hmm.
So one of the ways that I do like the business is that we had an opportunity when it failed that we could treat individuals, people, with what I would say with dignity, what I would say with compassion, but still it's a business, right? Opportunity if you're not able to pay on what you owe us to stay in that unit or to buy it, then we have to come to a conclusion. Right? Now, the path to the conclusion is my choice because it's my business. But we took the decision early on is that with the expectation when that would fail, is that we would provide a path for them to leave the home most time. Our business model based on the fact is that we were financing the home. We owned a collateralized interest in it. We win anyway, right? I mean, I'm going to get the home, back, but the recovery, it's about recovering the human as much as it is recovering the asset itself. Our philosophy and our strategy was that if an individual or family wasn't able to make a payment, of course, you find out, you probably go through the promise to pay, scenario. But if you really came to the outright bottom line that they weren't able to succeed, now I move towards recovering and how am I able to help them out of this situation, more so to help them with the next step, right? To exit the unit, exit the home, that I could get the home back. I could go down the road and recover and resell it again. But then to give them a start to go forward, you have to step in and be that glue in their lives. Some people will call it a cash for keys concept. Some people, there's different terminology, but hundreds of times I would say, where an individual or families begin to get in the arrears or behind. We've approached it in that manner. We got our units back in great shape. Of course, we had the opportunity for legal action, but we didn't pursue that. But many times we would give a family, $500 to $1,000 to help them up to get to a place or to move to the next place, whatever that might be, where, you're kind of lifting up the downtrodden. And so in many ways, most banks, or if you will, call it most lending institutions, it becomes a battle between the borrower and the lender. And then most times the asset takes the hit, if you will, becomes the pawn in between. And, I would say it becomes the venting of the anger of the individual in the house. Right? So, but again, is there a better way? We controlled every aspect, but taking a proactive or what I would say a pro-human element or a pro-human approach to it has always served us well to do that. At least in that asset class. And so we continue down that path of even with mobile home parks, how do we operate in a manner that I would say is Christ-like? Not only from that on an individual tenant basis, on a monthly basis, mobile home parks can be seen as small cities. And we just happen to have a manager who's the mayor of that. And so our constituents, or that manager is the thermostat that dictates the temperature within our community. Thermometers reflect temperature, thermostats dictate temperature. So our culture that we are constantly working on is what's that thermostat, what's the temperature, within inside our communities that we want to promote. And because it's a city, you have residents that everybody is operating and going through life, different stages, different events. Some are good, some are not so good. But then again, it reflects back to how do we recover the human element as much as we can to the point that we can from a business standpoint, and then move them through that transition as quickly as we can as well.
But say, let's just try to give a concrete example. I probably own a manufactured home, mobile home parks. Basically pay monthly rent on the dirt my manufactured home is sitting on. And I failed to pay for the rent, say for consecutively 3 months. And my understanding is you will come in and offer to buy my manufactured home. And then you also give me cash to help me to transition to the next stage or to the next place I will go, be able to afford the next place I will be moving into, correct?
Yeah, that's a great scenario. So in our customer base within parks, there are two. One is just like you own your home and you're renting the space for your home to sit there. The other scenario is we own your home and
Hmm.
you're renting your home from us, all right? So if you're renting our home from us, that particular situation, we definitely want to move and try to, I would say, find a solution. But you are in a little bit more of a vulnerable position because you don't own that unit. But at the same time, if you are struggling, we always within the marketplace we have connections to local what I would call support. Depending what's happening in your life and your family, nonprofits that perhaps all you need is a month or two of subsidy to get through. Lost a job, I'll have a job, but by the time I lose my job and I get my next paycheck, there's a month, right? And so how do I answer for that? And we do that all the time. We have access and on speed dial, local organizations that can help, kind of be the Band-Aid there for you. If you own your home, we rarely have that issue where, believe it or not, because lot rent is generally speaking the most affordable way that you can live in a mobile home community, meaning you're obviously not renting the home from us. And if you own the home and don't have a bank involved, the lot rent's your only payment. And so we do work through that situation because the last thing we want to do is take a home that you own and go through the legal process to get that. It's very rare in our business where that happens. Now, you may live in a unit, just over a period of time. You may come to us and say, hey, listen, I've got a change of life. I've got to move. I've got to do some. Would you be interested in buying that home? Absolutely, we would. Because we want to protect that space. What's valuable to us is the unit on that space. Many times, if an individual gets behind on just a lot rent only, the payment is roughly about 40% of what they would be paying in the home rent. It's an easier recoverable event in their life. It works out most times, where they're able to either borrow or again, they can, through a social or nonprofit, get that problem fixed. It's rare that we would do that, but we always have the opportunity that if, again, I think you mentioned the scenario, if it's a capital crunch, and they do want to sell, we absolutely will buy that home to maintain occupancy within the park.
So you mentioned you have these two business model in your mobile home parks, and from some of my mobile home park friends, I know that they tend to operate on the first one, just really let the tenant to own the manufactured home, and then they just rent out the dirt to them. Much less maintenance. They only need to hire a few people, maybe one or two, a 300 manufactured home park. But then you also have this second part. To me, the scale of business that you are doing, you can easily just do the first model rather than the second. Like, why do you choose to do both?
Within mobile home communities across the country, it really becomes one of the last very few opportunities or options for people, to own a home and to at a very affordable price and to have their own space versus a condo or townhome where you've got common walls, right? In many parks have some very nice amenities for their families. So we love the aspect of those communities, those types of properties tend to have a higher value of the individuals that are in those communities. So number two, it's great because it creates a homeowner's a very what I would call a sticky customer, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
So statistically, if Emily owns her mobile home, her average tenancy somewhere is in the range of 13 to 15 years. If Emily is renting a mobile home from us, well, that might be 12 months, might be 18 months, right? Could be 7 or 8 months. But generally speaking, we'll see that unit or Emily will move on to another type of housing within 2 years.
Mhm.
There's a high probability of that. So from a longevity, a long-term cash flow play, mobile home parks with tenant-owned homes where she owns her own home is highly stabilized, a very highly predictable, business model. And again, housing, everybody has to live someplace. The other alternative with it is that, in the mobile home park space, we have across the country a finite number of manufactured home communities. The friction with that is most municipalities, what we call not in my backyard mentality, right? We see that as an answer, but we don't want that as an answer within our communities, right? It would be like, it would be like Emily, is that if somebody came and knocked on your door and said, the vacant 10 acres across the street from you, we've got a proposal to build a mobile home park. Oh yeah, we need affordable housing. I just don't want it next to mine, right? I don't want it in my backyard. And so across the nation, what we're seeing is more communities, affordable home communities like that are closing down than are being built. And so why are they being closed? Because many communities, and it's probably pretty common, you'll see that have been built around coastal areas, i.e. like a Florida, right, in California coast. And those are very, a mobile home park over a period of time may not be the highest and best use of that particular property, right?
Mhm, mhm,
So, because you may get 8 homes per acre, or you might get 10 homes per acre, but it's horizontal in nature. So a developer will come in and find a great piece of property that may be up against a shoreline, or have some attractive feature to it that they can go vertical and have a higher density within that ground than what's being used there currently with the mobile home park. So we are ultimately seeing an attrition of mobile home parks, within a contraction actually within the total number of communities. And so what
mm,
does that do? Well, that means the demand has grown, inventory is decreasing. So that means the
mm.
value of those particular assets, of course, continue to increase.
Love it. So speaking of the value, now I would like to ask you, what kind of returns can investor expect from investing your mobile home parks?
Yeah, this is that time for that little warning, right? That little don't guarantee. So manufactured home communities traditionally, and what's made them from a market standpoint, they used to be secretive, right? They used to be, nobody knew about them, and those that did really just kind of turned their head against them, right? It's just kind of, it's not, they're not fancy, they're proverbially not the sexy investment, of course. And so there was what I like to call an invisible moat. You think of a castle and a moat around it. And what that basically meant was that society in general, or the market in general, was not attracted to the asset just simply because of, either the visual or the optics, or again, nobody wanted to tell their friends at their parties, hey, what do you do? Well, I own mobile home parks. Yeah. So that mode has slowly over the last decade dried up, because institutional or Wall Street investors have discovered,
The secret.
really, right, discovered the gold that is land lease, mobile home community, RV storage, self-storage, really those asset classes that have been non-correlating to just about every other facet of the housing market or investment market, for that matter. Mobile home parks over the last 20 years, you'd find that they're beta against the market. They continue to grow in value. They continue to prove out to be stabilized returns. And again, primarily from the standpoint is, we have less inventory, but we have people that need affordable housing, and those that own their homes in their communities, they find that they can stay there for a long period of time. And then the owners find that over a period of time, because of that stickiness of that customer, they're able to, on an annual basis, do apply rent increases. And there's a
Hmm.
lot of philosophy on how fast you do that or to what extent. But those particular tenants are able to absorb that, because, if Emily lives in a mobile home community where the average space rent is $350 a month, right?
Hmm.
Over a period of time and doing a 5% annual increase, that's an expense that she, within her, monthly income and their expenses, that tends to be easily acclimated into the budget, as opposed to if you're renting an apartment, it's $1,000, and then you got to go back in the market to rent another apartment that rents may have escalated to 13 to 1400. That's a different delta by which families have to overcome. So again, the manufactured home or the mobile home park has proven itself to be very durable. And I don't want to say bulletproof to some degree, but returns from a standpoint of, it's not unusual for the parks that we acquire, which we always look for some value add component of it. And a value added meaning is we put in very little dollars to to get a much higher return on those dollars, within the community. Those returns can, on an IRR basis, 15 to 25%. I mean, it's very achievable within that asset class. The one thing about a mobile home park is that, unlike multifamily, when an owner decides to increase a rent, one of our value adds is we're looking for communities that may have submarket lot rents. So Emily's home, she has her lot rent she's paying is 200, but we see that within that market, every other park around maybe at a $300 benchmark, right? So we would come in and then begin to do an escalation plan, but really with 60 days, we're going to notify Emily just to say, based on what we see in the market, to bring the park up to market, we're going to move through a rent increase. We increase revenue by just simply a notice. And that doesn't necessarily mean that those dollars have to go back into what we would call CapEx, park improvements. It just simply is that's an element by which to increase NOI just by elevating and bringing the park up to market. And then there's some other forced appreciations that, of course, fixing the park and filling spaces and increasing operating efficiencies, those kinds of facets within operations as well.
Love it. So what type of expenses are associated with owning and operating mobile home parks?
So from a personnel level, and you had alluded to that, so you can scale portfolios of park without what you would say, or perhaps in other businesses, commensurate with scaling of labor at the same time. Meaning is the mobile home park oversight or management is, generally speaking, you've got an on-site individual, you may have an on-site maintenance. Well, those come with every community that you acquire. It isn't as if you're adding, that's what's there operationally. But higher level staff is really quite lean. Much of the centralized operations of a park is really just an upflow of financial information from what's happening there locally. It is one of those businesses that very little labor is required in order to really upscale the number of communities that you own and operate. That's one of the benefits, of course, with communities, as opposed to, sometimes with multifamily, you get a little bit more labor intensive, and there are other types, senior housing, which, that's where your heart is. And that's much more labor intensive or more labor required to own and operate, which is good because you measure that in your financial fee. And then as far as expenses, to own and operate a mobile home park, we land in at about a 35 to maybe no more than 40% of gross operating income to operate our communities. And that figure generally will go down as you scale in size of the park, or as you add units to the park. You're not, again, necessarily increasing expenses as you are commensurately increasing revenue. Multifamily apartments and multi-units, they tend to probably be much more in the 50% range, because you have to maintain the structure, right? And the exterior of it. And so you have a higher degree of maintenance within the buildings themselves. Within mobile home communities, again, if Emily owns her home, Emily's responsible for the maintenance, right? The exterior, the interior, the repairs, the insurance, and those costs that come along with owning a home. And we don't absorb that, or that's not a cost that's passed through to the operation side of the parks.
So basically, even with the 300 manufactured mobile home parks, basically just need two personnel, a manager and plus a maintenance guy. It's really just to maintain the park.
That's correct. Yeah, and then your central management or your office staff, as you get large enough, you would add, as you build out regionals or concentrations with areas, then you would plug in somebody to oversee sectors, or you assign a certain number of parks as you go across the nation. There are a lot of very large operators that, again, they have on-park staff, and then they'll have a regional that may oversee 10 of those parks, and they directly manage the managers. And then you'll have somebody at the corporate level that could take over a portion of the United States, as an example. And so, but really much of the management, if done correctly, happens right within the community itself.
Okay. Okay. How do you maximize projected cash flow in mobile home parks? And my understanding, please correct me if I'm wrong, because you did touch that there is a high demand but then low inventory, so it does put you in a very good position. And second, you tend to do the value added approach. So identify opportunities where you can, I mean, there is room for increase in terms of the rental payment. And plus, the other thing I see that there is very low expenses associated with mobile home parks. So that's how you can maximize the cash flow. Am I correct?
Yes, yeah, you're spot on. Depending on the market where you are, the type of asset, parks are, parks to some degree have different grades. You can within a city, you can drive, you'll find it used to be, and it is still used as a kind of a star system with grading parks, right? So it could be a 1 star. You don't want a 1 star, but it goes all the way up to a 5 star, which is huge amenities, huge clubhouse, wide paved streets, could have activities, just it would be a place that most of us just I would live there without question. Depending on the valuation of the park, depends on if we would call it, we evaluate it on a cash flow basis, right? And again, some parks have a higher opportunity for replacement, as an example, or future development. But our primary way to determine what the value of a park or how we're buying it is really just a return on the cash flow that's currently producing. So in our particular case, so if you, as an example, if the going rate is a 5% cap rate on that, let's say is that, if you take $1 and you times that times 12, that's $12. Well, but if you put a measurement of return on that of 5%, I think you're going to be that dollars equal to maybe $240 of NOI. So we're always moving the needle to try to find dollars within our community by which we can, based on a cap rate, which we believe the value of finding that dormant revenue within our parks. And so we look for that. We strive very hard to, as we're qualifying an asset, whether or not we're going to buy it or not, is there an opportunity to bring rents to market? They may, again, the current owner may be behind the market, which happens quite often. If there's vacant space, we bring homes in and we fill those vacant spaces again to capture that lot. If, an easy math is it that if lot rent's 400 a month within that market, and we acquire that park and there's not a unit on it, which in our thesis, in our evaluation, we don't pay because that space doesn't produce cash flow, right? So, but if we invest in a unit to bring it in that park based on an expense and an NOI, we do realize that if there's a home sitting there, we probably have a value of somewhere in the range of $50,000 to $60,000 on that particular lot, right?
Mm-hmm.
So again, it's not a complicated game. You're just simply, if I have 50 vacant lots and I bring a unit in, and then that new lot, as it generates a rent, I'm adding appreciation value on a cash flow concept, to my park. Sometimes utilities. Many times, because these particular properties have, they're serviced by the municipality, the city, but there's a single meter at that address, right, that filters water through all the residents, right? And so we'll look at that as an opportunity to offload the cost of the water by doing a formulaic way to charge water to tenants, but the common way to do it is that we actually install a water meter on each resident, just like we do on our homes, right? So that puts responsibility of the cost of that utility, with the residents. So what instantaneously now all of a sudden, as we've moved off the expense side of the PM, we've just wiped out what the cost of water is to us. And the individuals are now more responsible for that. So that's another value add. And then of course, if we can do management efficiencies by reducing costs, we're always being detectives on where to do that. And if there's homes that we buy that come with the park, how do we want to treat those? If they're rentals, do we want to put them in our sales program or finance individuals to buy the homes? That's another value add. It's another stream of yield that we can, parks give you the opportunity, and may not be all, kind of the 5 legs of the stool, but generally speaking, our target has to provide, and there has to be a way to, again, maximize revenue by just simply doing those value add opportunities. And then we take each value add opportunity and we actually apply an ROI to it. based on cost of dollar in versus our return on what we're doing there on the work. So
Mm-hmm.
that's a way to just measure, provide measurement on dollars that are investing into the community. And sometimes you measure that and say, maybe we change the way that we do that because it isn't producing, that $1, kind of finding dollars throughout a community. It may or may not pencil out the way that we thought of it would. But that's just our approach with it. A little bit forensic in nature, but and then of course you have the market, right? The local municipality, the MSA by which you're buying in, and you're looking, just like everybody does, you look for trends and make sure that population and economically is trending up, not going the other way. So yeah, there's certain criteria there that we look for.
What's the average, say, occupancy rates in your mobile home parks?
Yeah, good question. So it's measured. So occupancy is measured in two areas, generally speaking, with mobile home parks. It's a physical occupancy. It's a physical occupancy and economic occupancy. So, and I'll give you
Yes.
a real easy example. So if we're acquiring a 100-space park, and let's say 50 of those lots have a home on them, okay?
Mm-hmm.
So that means 50 vacant lots. So we would say that that particular community has a physical occupancy of 50% or 50 homes.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if in those 50 that have physical homes on them, let's say 10 of those homes were vacant, okay, for whatever reason, and we're buying, we would say that that park now has an economic of 40 units, right?
Mm-hmm.
Overall. So our cash flow is really geared towards extrapolating a value on those 40 because those are the ones that are generating the revenue. So
Mm-hmm.
it's not necessarily a concept wide. You're buying a 100-space park or you're buying a physical occupancy of 50. No, we're buying, in essence, if you will, a 40-space community that has either upside in filling the vacant lots or filling the vacant homes, the other 10 homes, which we would incorporate and buy and then put into a rental or a sales program. So the meat of it is what's there, what's producing, and then putting a value on that cash flow.
Okay. Okay. That's very good. I think the mobile home park is a very popular option for 55 plus.
Absolutely. And I'll take our backyard here along the Denver area. So within every city, there are age restricted communities. You have to meet a minimum age to live there. And those provide outstanding quality of housing for seniors. Now, generally speaking, it's 55 and older, but it provides a like-kind community and environment for seniors to connect with other like-kind seniors. Now, it doesn't mean seniors don't live in family communities, but families can't live in a senior community. So there's a built-in governance that protects an age group. Okay, so those communities tend to be highly popular. They tend to provide, and as you and I have talked before, what do seniors look for? What gives them life as they get older? And many times seniors become separated from or disconnected from human connection or other, either via family or for wherever they live, or they may be in the house where them and the spouse lived and the spouse may have passed and they're still there. And of course they're trying to upkeep and do that, but their relationship was based on a marriage, which no longer, that other individual isn't there. So where do they go and how do they? Well, we know that within the senior phasing of life or the senior community, you cannot have enough opportunity to connect with other humans within that age group to have relationship, right? That's a senior currency, I would call it. That's very important for not only mental and emotional health, but the will to connect and serve with other people. And so in one of the businesses that we have, and you mentioned our brokerage, we list and sell homes, and we specialize within listing and selling homes within senior communities here in the Denver market. That was, having been in the business 20 years, you get to observe certain markets which are either being underserved, there's value there, or perhaps that individuals, the way they're approaching the market isn't, it could be done much better. So almost 3.5 years ago, God had prompted on me to launch and start to serve this community of people not me doing it, but I have two senior ladies that I've known for. I used to be the president of a board of a Christian home that we housed single pregnant females, and they would come to us that were pregnant and homeless, many times abandoned, many times living on streets. And so we would bring them in, and they would come live at our house. It was a home, and so they had all through the pregnancy and then delivering the child. And then what we would do is obviously before the pregnancy, before the child, and then post birth is teach them life skills by which they can eventually become independent and support themselves and their child. So I had a connection with one of our house mothers there for a long period of time. And I've known these two ladies, they're in their mid 70s. It was just a God thing, God timing, where they have a heart to serve. Economically, they were at an age, they obviously weren't working, but still had financial needs. And to some degree, how could we go to this market that was the aging community within mobile home parks, which I had experience, use their gifting and their passion, and then we bring all that together in a somewhat of a crescendo and say, oh, we can go do this in the market. It'll provide a path of income for you. It'll provide a path of service to the seniors. And really, to be quite honest, there's no better person to help a senior through probably one of the most traumatic, or going to be one of the most traumatic seasons in their lives. That's either coming out of a home where they were downsizing, or the next transition, which may be being into a really truly assisted living, or unfortunately in cases of passing, and then what happens. And so these ladies, story and after story and testimony after testimony of how they take care of they adopt every client that they have, they adopt. And it's been phenomenal to sit back and watch what that mission field, what they've done with serving these people. From the business standpoint, obviously with selling, listing and selling, and then we also have the opportunity, I have an investment vehicle by which we acquire homes. And in many cases, many times with seniors, the event that might transition them out of a home, it may not be planned. It may be instantaneous in some ways. And so we've able to come along families, don't know what to do next with a home, or don't want to pay the lot rent. Our mobile home communities within the Denver market, our lot rents are $1,100 a month right now. Okay. If a senior passes and that burden financially falls onto a family, we're able to step in and give them an exit, to relieve them financially of that monthly burden. And then we take the home, and of course, we go in and do what we do. And my two senior gals, we stage the home, and they do fantastic. And of course, it all starts all over again. It starts with somebody they're going to meet, a senior that's going to come in. They adopt, they provide ministry and prayer and compassion and understanding, and able to communicate and trust, right? Trust is really important because seniors trust other seniors. And so it's a phenomenal work that they do, for sure.
I love it. For a senior, they need to sell their house so that they can afford expenses for assisted living or memory care.
That's correct.
But the act of selling the house is going to trigger a large amount of tax. So do your broker maybe provide a service of maybe helping them to do the seller finance so that it will not trigger that much tax, and it will help them to transition to the next stage so that they can afford the payments for the assisted living or memory care?
Yeah, in this particular event is if they're coming out of a manufactured home that they live in. And again, the next step is with regard to assisted, because there's, depending on the organization, is that the home would be looked at as an asset that could be leveraged towards the long-term care before Medicare or Medicaid kick in. That's really common. We do our best on a sale, and I think that's what you're talking about. If a senior is selling a home, to carry back the financing by which to accommodate really a taxable event in their life. The senior market to do that model presents some challenges from the standpoint is, that a senior, if they were to sell their home and they were going to carry back the financing, let's say the financing went out 10, 15 years, right? Most families that are involved in this conversation, Emily, that's too high risk, first of all.
Mm, mm,
And then many times they have to look at the longevity of the individual versus the longevity of the payment coming in as well. So it's kind of what's the highest and best use of exiting out of the home, because the family's generally driving those decisions when it comes to placing an individual into an assisted living. And then the assisted living entity is always doing an asset profile as well. And again, because that has to do with more of the long-term insurance as well, to do that. So the simple answer to your question, we try not to get too deep into that side of it when the next phase of a senior moves out of the home that we may be listing to sell. It's a great question. I would say our wheelhouse isn't there. Our wheelhouse is really to serve in maximizing the listing dollars and maximizing the listing price for the senior or for the senior's family who's really at that point managing much of the estate in order to give them highest and best dollars that they can use for the next step.
okay. Thank you. Thank you. And my next three questions more personal. What books has had the most significant professional impact on you?
It's a really good question, and I appreciate you asking. And I would say obviously from a wisdom standpoint, obviously I'm going to
It's the Bible.
is the Bible. That's
Correct.
correct. I find that many problems in my life aren't from a knowledge problem or lack of knowledge. It's from a lack of wisdom. And gaining wisdom is leveraged or levered more in my life as time goes on. And previously, it's a funny thing with with business and as most of your listeners would experience is that you just got to win 51% of the time. Okay. I can tell you historically and testimony wise, I'm just about 51%. I might falter back a little bit, but there's been, I got to manage Michael. That's if there's one person on the earth that's the kink in the whole formula, it's me. Obviously biblical, the Bible, in much of what I go back to is Jesus's parables that I really reflect on quite a bit, because he said, if the wisdom to understand that if you understand this, it unlocks, right? It's a key to unlocking much of the kingdom in its operation. From a business standpoint, there are a few books that Kiyosaki's Rich Dad, Poor Dad, which was one that I read many, many years ago. And again, just kind of renewed my mind as even going to that investment conference many years ago, I didn't realize the bias or I would say poor thinking or my lack-mindedness in many ways was there. And so understanding assets and liabilities more so. I don't have a financial background. I would encourage anybody that's out there to move forward and study financing principles within business. So Kiyosaki, there's a pastor I listened to. He passed away several years ago. Miles Monroe, Rediscovering the Kingdom, which is completely transformed and just kind of lifted my skull up and kind of blew my whole thinking about his kingdom, which we really don't talk much about, at least in the Western culture. But it's about removing the overlay of the Western civilization over the Bible that we read the Bible through, and understanding what truly kingdom thinking or kingdom principles are really about. And another pastor, Wendell Smith, many years ago wrote Prosperity with a Purpose. And so attempting to do the right thing with the right increase with God, right? Godliness with contentment is great gain. And so the increase that he has, and I do believe that for the increase of the wealth doesn't have trouble. What he adds. And so the parable of the talents in Matthew has always resonated with me as a great, and I guess I'll probably just kind of wrap up with this a little bit. We as Christians, and we're taught this, and I don't disagree, but why did God create man, right? Why were we created? right? And what, if I was to ask you that, what would you say?
We were created in his image, and
To do
we
what?
were
Yeah, to do.
to advance his kingdom. But to be honest, God doesn't need us to advance his kingdom. Yeah, we are just very honored to be part of the journey.
That's right. A common response in many to worship God.
Mhm.
We were created to worship, and
Glorify him.
and in Genesis he created everything in 6 days, right? But what he didn't have and had yet to be created was a manager, was us, right? So
Mhm.
he laid out the framework of the earth, but there was nobody to oversee that. There was nobody to manage his creation, which was us, right? And
Yeah.
so from my standpoint, is my level of management is a lifelong journey to manage and multiply what he brings across my hands, right? And so the parable of the talents is really, it identifies and mirrors that lesson, that here was an owner giving to individuals based on their management levels, right? With an expectation when the owner came back that I expect you to do something with it. I'm going to make you accountable. It didn't have anything to do with worship, didn't have anything to do with what we believe to be servant. It was simply as take my seed and make it grow, and then I will account. And then if you prove that you can make it grow, guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to give you more seed. So two things out of that story, that parable, that really affected my thinking many years ago, which I hadn't read it in there, which was, number one, is that if you do nothing, it'll be taken from you and it'll be given to others that will. Number two is your ability to manage isn't fixed. What that basically meant is that there were managers at different levels, but each was given according to their own ability.
Mhm.
Okay. So what it freed me up in my mind was I'm not
Mhm.
in my ability, right? I simply have to go grow my ability, which that in turn would give him the opportunity to increase me more, right? So for me, I look back on business successes and to some degree failures, and I could pinpoint pretty quickly it was it was my management. It was either my management good or my management not so good. That's the beauty of it. He's given us as an assignment, okay? And within that assignment, whatever it is that we're doing is to grow within our ability to take that resources. And again, it could be people, could be money, could be properties, could be mobile home parks, could be any of that. And promote that and grow that and increase your ability to manage, increase your ability to manage. Because becomes with that is more responsibility and then more increase as well.
I love it. I also want to add that God gave us the ability. If God wants to put us in a certain position, even we don't have the certain skills to start with, but if God wants to put us in this position, He will give us the skill.
I found, and maybe your listeners can resonate, you're generally promoted beyond one level of your ability. You're generally one promotion away or ahead of probably where, because you're being promoted within the next level of right
Yeah,
responsibility.
yeah.
So he gives you the ability to be where you are. It's no truer statement. But then the expectation is I give you a base of ability, but I also expect you to develop that ability as well as we go forward. And so the innate ability within us, or the innate favor, in order to move us into places where he wants us, then I think there's also our obligation, our responsibility to take where we are, and again to continue, because he's always, I believe, wanting to move us into a place of higher relevance and impact towards by which we can build the kingdom of God. And that's why, to kind of tie it all back, I believe in business, and I believe in business ownership, and I believe in expansion, and I believe in maybe capitalism as an example. But I do believe the fact that as we grow in our abilities and our footprint on the earth expands, it is really moving the kingdom of God outward as well as our organizations. Because Emily, if you have a company with 100 employees, your culture is being passed through 100 people, which of course
Mhm.
transcends into another. Everybody, it's kind of one of those relational things, right? Everybody knows that 500 people, whatever the number is you want to use. But as your company grows and then you go from 100 to 1,000, right? The culture of the company, the spirit of God is moving through you now to a larger audience that you're responsible for them. They're responsible for doing the assignment you've given them. But that multiplication, if you will, is, I believe, again, at the essence to 30, 60, 90, 100-fold, right? If you will, to grow, not only to grow us, but to grow his kingdom, of course.
Yes, it's what you just shared also reminds me a friend I met from a church I went probably was 5, 6 years ago. So he was an employee of a company and he came to Christ because his CEO is a Christian. And then that CEO brought so many people to Christ. Because
Yes,
the first thing he did once they hired them, basically brought them home and then started the Bible study. And they were kind of in an employee situation, so they felt
that's
like they
right.
had to go. But that turned out to be such a blessing. All these people, because of they came to Christ, they got the most precious gift in their life.
Because he did a job. He wasn't hired necessarily perhaps because he was a believer, but he was hired and promoted because he was excellent.
Mm.
He provided in certain qualities within the organization that he stood above, right, as an example. And he
Mhm.
got noticed for that. Now that's Christ working through him, but there was a standard by which he operated that was doing it as unto the Lord. So we do have a mandate that we should be promoted because we're doing it better. We do things supernaturally that other natural people may or may not be doing, within an organization, within a company. And God's favor by which we are doing, um, we should be the ones that are being promoted. We should be the businesses that should be getting the calls or getting the orders or getting the service because we do things. We're called to a level of operational excellence in everything that we do. And that in our world today is a way to separate ourselves, if you will, by what we're doing. And then again, as those promotions happen, of course, now, as you were talking about, that's a great example that I have an influence. If I witness to a manager under me and that manager oversees 100 people, right? I just went from Judea, as an example, to other parts of the world because that manager now, I don't have to witness to the 100 people under him. But if I'm witnessing and of course he accepts Christ, now all of a sudden again, he becomes a thermostat over the 100 people in that department, right? So multiplication begins to take place within the organization. All he was faithful is I'm going to take my leaders and I'm going to present to them as an example what Christ has done in the transformation I've seen just by that relationship. And it's Christ's leadership example can be followed, and in my opinion, should, is that it can carry on without us. His organization, I think I mentioned that to you at the conference, right? His leadership principle was his organization grew when he left. It actually
Mhm.
was smaller when he was present, but it
Mhm.
actually expanded and multiplied after he had left. It replicated through, right? It replicated through a small group of individuals that permeated the earth. Yeah, that's a pretty amazing story when you think about it. Is I don't have to be here. I have to have a manager, or I have to have a leader within my organization, or I have to have somebody who has influence over people. That's who you're going to pour your life into, right? That's who you're going to be a witness to, because that transcends you having to, you don't have to be all places at all times. You have to be pouring into somebody,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
then they go pour, right? And they take that witness and go forward as well.
Yeah. And that's not only applied to our businesses. I would say just really praying for opportunities to share the gospel on a daily basis, even maybe
Yes,
just a stranger on the street. You never know. You plant a seed, then the person, maybe 2 or 3 or even 5 or 10 years from now, he became a believer, then he can be a good witness to the other people. And that's how we can advance God's kingdom. Yeah.
totally agree. The only thing that God really can use is our silence, right?
Yeah. 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 Amen. Amen. How can our audience get in touch with you?
My company is cl3capital.com. And then my email address is michaelwilson@cl3capital.com. Letter CL, the number 3 capital.com. And anybody is welcome to reach out to me, whatever subject on I'll be glad to listen and serve in any way I can.
Thank you, Michael. I really appreciate that you spend more than 1.5 hours of time with us.
Sorry. There's some things I get to talking about, and I just you got to shut me down.
This is really good. I appreciate that you share all your knowledge, experience, as well as most importantly, is your faith with it. And I believe it's going to benefit our audience tremendously. Yeah. Thank you.
Well, I want to thank you. And if your audience may not know, but Emily was at a conference in Orlando that we met. And actually, she met my wife, Traci, I think at a break or something like that. Traci said, you got to come here and talk to her and hear what she does and all this. And so we sat down, and I think we of course, talked for a period of time. But your heart, your passion, your mission with regard to what it is that you're doing and moving towards, or I don't know if you're moving towards as much as it's pulling you towards it, right? There's a difference.
It is pulling me through, yeah.
You were and are an encouragement to us and in our walk, and challenging us to just even our moment at the conference, which was to is not only to believe for more, but to act on more as well. And with regard to our relationship with Christ and being a witness. So I appreciate that. I'm better for that meeting as well.
Oh, thank you. You just brought me to tears.
It was a refreshing opportunity to meet you and to get to know you. And that's what's exciting. I don't know what's going to happen next, but things are moving quickly for you. And your level of relevance is expanding right now as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you.